quite elusive when it comes to ZEC. Some of us have been here since the first election in 1980. We've seen enough of elections, not only in this country but on the continent. Enough for some of us to, especially after the 2013 elections, to have dismissed elections as any kind of useful function beyond legitimizing authoritarian regimes. In fact, it is religion that, in the Zimbabwe case in particular, elections have become a way of legitimizing as the clerk state. Now, let's begin on the first level, the issue of the rigging. I was shocked when we were doing research on that. And for us, some of us have been wanting to know really what is rigging about. I was shocked the other day when we spoke to somebody through one of us here, that in 2000, we alleged, so there's no proof, that in 2000 and 2002 elections, the elections were simply written out, no reference to the ballot, written out and announced. Another anecdote is that in 2002 presidential elections, I was telephoned by a friend who was on ZEC at the time. 4 in the morning, he says, "Oh my God, Mugabe has lost the election." I came into town from the farm, 9 o'clock press conference at Mukwati, and a very sullen atmosphere. And then the chairman of ZEC at that time began announcing the results, and Bob had won. So the issue of mismanagement or rigging of election has been fascinating me. I wanted to know how it's done. In 2008, I had occasion to meet 12 of the persons who were known to be running the rigging machine. And one of them gave me this anecdote. The polling postal votes. The boxes arrived from the various embassies and were received at Tomlinson Depot. That's where they were counted. And they opened the box which came from our embassy in Kinshasa. There were 98 members of staff in Kinshasa. And out of 98, only 3 voted for Mugabe. So what did they do? The box, they burnt the box. So I was saying all this, that the issue of rigging is not anecdotal. It's becoming almost institutionalized. And for us in the political economy, we rely heavily on the historical backdrop, the main of which for some of us is the fact that liberation movements or parties of independence lose favor with the people very quickly. In the case of Zimbabwe, the ZANU-PF, and I say so as someone who came in the liberation movement for the first election in 1980, with this tremendous reception. Mugabe had something like 100,000 at Highfield Downs. And I mean, it was just amazing. And in fact, people don't know this, but there could have been a coup by General Walls, were it not for the turnout on the 4th of March 1980, when the election results were announced. But that popular base dissipated with time, and understandably. And I would say, from my own analysis, ZANU-PF lost the mass base in the 90s, and has never been able to restore it. And needless to add, will never restore it. So in terms of forecasting and expectations, I have always known that ZANU-PF lost every election since 2000. without having to show evidence of it. But also because on the basis of what we saw across the country at every election. And one of the major tools for the manipulation and management of elections in this country, regrettably, has become the issue of intimidation and violence. A colleague told me the other day that don't talk too much about rigging. The biggest rigging machinery in ZANU-PF has always been intimidation. And those of us we have relatives who have come from rural areas, and even now, the population out there fears elections because of this institution of violence and intimidation. So, I thought I'd give that kind of backdrop, and then add that really this election becomes a very interesting case study, not only for ourselves as Zimbabweans, but I think for the African continent. And I think when all is said and done, and reading the papers as we have been reading them, including the papers by respondent Elton Mangoma, who I will introduce shortly, it has really become a very interesting case study in the history and conduct of elections in the African continent. The amount of scrutiny, the amount of international presence in this country, the highest ever since 1980, speaks for itself. So, our task tonight is really to hear from the experts, and we have chosen experts who are also accountants, because it's also about numbers. And Elton Mangoma will be our first speaker, because Doug Coltart is delayed at the filing papers related to this case on Wednesday. It will be a short week. So we'll have Elton Mangoma. Elton Mangoma is one of the leading accountants in this country. I've known him for years as a fine accountant. He's assisted me personally, but also he's a politician. He was a presidential candidate, and his document is available. His response, and it was that which attracted me to invite him to speak. And for the lawyers who are feeling sub judice, we just want to inform you that Elton checked on that. Both as an accountant and as a budding lawyer. So Elton, I'll leave it to you to give us the numbers.
Thank you, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think when it comes to elections, the issue of rigging has always been one of the key things that people sometimes say, why should I go and vote? Because it will be rigged. And I think over the years, I've been involved in tightening both the electoral law and the constitution to try and reduce and minimize the areas of theft. And I think, despite what has happened, I think we actually, as a country, have the best electoral law, and certainly in certain sections, the best constitution, most of which are not implemented. So we really have got people who are bent on not following the law. And that has been one of our major issues with ZEC. And I see the court case for us being really on two major issues. The first being where the laws of the country followed during elections or not. There's one thing, and I will not delve into that because that's not my area. The other being, did we have somebody who won in this presidential election or not? That's what I will try and dwell on. So we are going to first define what is winning. Whereas on the parliamentary or councils, anybody who has got a majority has won. With presidential election, a person has got to win when they get 50% of the vote plus one. So you must have a majority. Now, it basically means that the way the parliamentary councils is done is different from the way the presidential is done. So every vote counts for the presidential. So whilst a lot of people were concentrating on really the difference between Nelson Chamisa and Emerson Mnangagwa, that is not where the issue was. The issue was there a winner or not? And even when you saw the demeanor of how ZEC was doing it, they understood that for there to be a winner, one had to be beyond 50% plus one. Now, the thing that attracted some of us wasn't so much the little size of our own votes, but it was the manner in which ZEC was actually announcing those results. It attracted our attention to say, under normal circumstances, people don't behave this way. There is something that is amiss. So it raised suspicions. What is it that is amiss? Then we started looking. The second, and that goes to how the March West became the outstanding thing, and people will simply say, surely if everywhere else we have been able to bring in Mudzi and bring in Rushinga and what's wrong with March West? It's really where now fudging was beginning to be more refined. So generally, even taking away the numbers, if ZEC had said, look, we have got the results, but they are so close, we need to have a second opinion or an audit, we would have actually understood. Because that's how people actually behave. When you are so close that you could possibly make a mistake, you need independent verification. And they would have called for an audit and even applied to the court to have the 5th day, the 4th of August extended so that an audit could be done. Then you know people are genuine. Because it was so close, the difference between losing and winning was 35,000 votes. And that one constituency like Harare South had 62,000 registered voters. So when you get to that, it just tells you, you better have all your things properly done or there is something wrong. So after announcement, we then got the results, the discs. So we started, whatever had been announced, and what was in the disc, we then found there were differences. So that was the first problem. So what was correct? Was what was announced the correct thing, or what is in the disc the correct thing? We really didn't know. And in my case, there was one announcement which gave another figure, then another announcement which gave another figure, then the disc which had another figure. Small figures, but they are all different. And you say to yourself, well, in our case, because we didn't have agents all over the country, but we also checked things like, I've gone with my family to a polling station. With my family, these are not people, friends or whatever. And there are 4 of us who have voted. I would assume they voted for me. And when the results came, there were only 2 votes. And then we say, okay, I know I voted for myself. Because I saw it. So, who else did and who did it? So you would start a fight in the home. Say, but you didn't vote for me and so and so. But it was those kind of things that people just began to say, but what is happening here? We have gone to vote, there are not many votes. So when I heard Thokozane Kupe speak about the same thing, where their candidate had gone to vote for himself, but with also his family, but got 0. And he said, this is a consistent pattern. We are not talking about what has been voted. We are talking about something else that has been put somewhere. We then found that just comparing the announcement and the discs, in our case, and it looks like those who got different discs also got different numbers. So when you actually find the number that we have ourselves is different from the numbers that other people are saying they got from their own discs. So the number 3,597 is the one that we have. Others have got a different number. But what was now showing here is that they had reduced slightly the numbers for Mnangagwa by 1,200. But they also reduced the numbers for Nelson by 2,900. So that's the difference you get, plus a few minuses and so on for the rest of the other 21 candidates. Only 1, 2, 3 candidates did not have any difference. And we are not talking, you can say, okay, they got confused with all these big numbers, but our little numbers, how do you get confused? You can't add a few numbers. So really, it started setting this alarm bell. But we had to adjust and hope that let's have a base. So we took our base as the detailed results that we got, which had 3,597 left more votes than what was announced. So we added where we needed to add, we subtracted where we needed to subtract. Then we took, there was this very funny thing about Mount Darwin and Bire constituencies, where the formula of addition was made such that it repeated itself. So you double counted certain numbers. So they're always dealing with small numbers, but big impacts, because you've got 210 constituencies. And at this stage, I am not convinced that this kind of error only occurred in those two. But for now, because this is what we have managed to be able to find in the short space of time, we are dealing with those two. They increased Chamisa's number in Mount Darwin by 618. They increased ED's number by 4,792. So we go to Mbire, they increased Chamisa's number by 229, and they increased ED's number by 2,293. So, the other one goes to slightly over 800, the other one is almost 7,000. So you've got to remove those, because they're totally not end, and no one can argue about it. Because here we are not talking about what's in the box, what's not in the box. We are simply saying your formula is wrong. So you have added the same number a few times. So when you do that, you then begin to see that really also a very consistent pattern. That there are less on Chamisa and there are more on ED. And now that pattern, you then say, is this an error, or is this part of the system? I leave the courts to decide. whether this can be regarded as an error or whatever. But from an audit point of view, if there is a system, then it tends closer to fraud rather than to a mistake. Then, for completeness, I subtracted 17 votes in Belvedere from ED. And why? Because there were 17 people who arrived at the polling station after 7 p.m. and were allowed to vote. So when the agent of the MDC got there, said, but these people were not here, why are they voting? Stop it. So it was stopped. So there were a few more, but the ones that he saw to have voted before he was stopped is 17. Could have been more. But this is what can be confirmed. So we subtract it. Then there were V11 forms. This is where, again, unfortunately, the MDC Alliance did not have agents everywhere. And sometimes where you had agents and we had agents, the V11 forms were never released. And so it affected us as well. So when we say there were no V11 forms, we actually know there were no V11 forms. And it's a fact. And we also had constituencies where we were involved where, despite that all the results were there, it took more than a day to declare a winner. And you say, what is the problem? And everybody got fed up and left and went home, because when you think you are losing, you just go home and leave it. So this is what was happening. But where you actually now had physical V11 forms, and we are now talking where there are physical V11 forms, and you compare that to the result on the CD. Right? So you know this is my V11, this is what is on the CD. And there are many, and the differences will be 14 here, 20 there, 50 there, and so on and so on. But consistently, there were nearly 20,000 of Chamisa's votes that were being deducted. So you've got 480, it's recorded as 460. And so on and so on. And at the same time, you had you had EDs being slightly added by 10 year, by 15 year, and that came to 10,000 votes. So between the two of them, someone has gained 10,000, someone has lost 20,000. So you have created a gap of 30,000. So what we do, we add back Chamisa's numbers, we take down ED's numbers. And I'm saying this so that you actually can understand that some of them were now, this is what we call falsification. Because if there are 2 votes, let them be 2. If there are 4, let them be 4. So this is how they were removing some votes. So they were totally disregarding the V11 form and simply putting in their own numbers. And also what we saw was that there were now non-existing polling stations that were added, totally non, where you manufacture the numbers. Simply say this is not there, so you start saying Busha got that Busha was given 27, I was given 5 votes. Chamisa was given 1,700, ED was given 5,396. Just manufacture. They're just being given. So we all got, except two candidates who got zeros. Huh? Even rejected votes was given 121. That's how, you know. So you want to take down all these false numbers because they are not there. But by now you are beginning to say what we are looking at, what is real and what is false. You really don't know anymore what is real and what is false. You just don't know. Because these are numbers you are stumbling upon and you are finding and so on. So numbers are being manufactured. We come to what I call overvoting. This is where it's very clear that the voters' roll would be able to say the maximum here is 1,000, or the maximum or the registered voters here are 300. Now, we found a polling station with 2,800 votes, when the maximum is supposed to be 1,000. Where it was 500, there will be 800 or 900. So there's a whole series of those overvoting. And there is a total of 31,000 of the overvoting. And by just removing the excess out of the total registered, so we are leaving a margin and assuming that at those polling stations there was 100% turnout. Now, is it ever possible to have 100% turnout? I was at my niece's wedding on Sunday. Even that, the relatives and so on, we didn't get 100% turnout. But we have left, out of all those, 100% turnout. So we have actually left some false votes in there. This is assuming everyone voted. So you take away the 31,000. Clearly, numbers that are being fudged. And instead of really turning around and saying, my friend, Mr. Presiding Officer, you had 200 registered voters. How come you now have 500 votes? We've had none of that. But it happened. I think there was even a clip on ZBC in Norton where the presiding officer was very proud to say, look, we have got some 600 registered voters, but so far we have 900. It's there by ZBC. Huh? Everyone saw it. And no alarm was ever raised. Now this is where most of this overvoting came from. So again, this is just what we found. Because it's quite, to list all the registered voters and then compare with the totals. So we just did it. I think enough work was done. It's not exhaustive. Then the big one is where you now have at a polling station, 200 for the councillor, 200 for the parliamentary, 300 for the presidential. And you say, how does that ever become possible? Because when every one of us went in, you are given 3 votes, 3 ballots. So one there, one there, one there. So at the end of the day, this must be self-balancing, barring 1 or 2. So you really, in accounting terms, this is what we call, it is balancing. Now our votes are not balancing. And for us, it was even now confirming what we had seen, because our candidate in Mvuru, he had come across a person with presidential ballots. And they actually fought to try and say, look, let's see what are you doing with it. And it's a police case. It still hasn't been sorted out. But we actually knew that there are more presidential ballots floating around until they then manifested themselves when this could not balance. Now, that, with what we checked, is over 113,000 votes disparity. Now, when you have corrected for all these things, because you must correct for them, our voter turnout, which we still know because there's some 100% somewhere, so maximum voter turnout becomes 4.6 million votes. And our voter turnout at 83%. And you then say, let's recalculate who got what and the percentages. And I just picked the two of interest. Chamisa then gets 46.1%, and ET gets 48.7%. So, according to this, which is still very generous, no one won the presidential election. And really, for anyone to think they won the election, I think the Mets failed them. The action of ZEC failed them. And that's how I think some of the rigging took place. And I can only say some, because the fear factor has not been factored in. But really, when the ballots, the votes are there, and the numbers have been put on the table, given that no one won the election. We were very strong about it, that no one won the election. And I think when some of this evidence was put, ZEC started revising their own numbers. And those revisions actually tell you that there is a further problem. They've revised the presidential numbers, even reducing the 35,000 winning margin to a smaller number, and making us all doubt, surely with all these question marks, can you call out a winner or not? They've also now changed the Mutare North numbers, I think just today, I think. And you actually say, really, what, are we in a lottery? Or we're in an election? Any self-serving and self-respecting commission would have resigned. That's what happens. Would have resigned, because this is a dog's breakfast. If I was being given this to audit, or if my colleagues were given this to audit, they'll be able to say, there is really nothing to audit, because the numbers are just not tying up. And therefore, in my own opinion, if I were the head of an auditor, this fails to be a credible numbers. And therefore, the credibility of this election is then shot straight away, just by the way the numbers have been handled. I think I would leave it at that. The conclusion, as I said, we have given, that we don't see, giving the benefit of the doubt that there is 100% turnout in a good number of polling stations, that none of the 23 candidates won the election. So I'm in very good company of losers. Thank you.
Before you ask done to take over. Keep saying they changed the numbers. Who are they?
It's ZEC. Wherever I'm saying they, it's ZEC, but what we have always said, the difference between ZEC and ZANU-PF is like saying there is a difference between yourself and your son. And we have said this so many times. So we are actually not scared to say it because we have been consistent on record that this ZEC was not independent enough, was not competent enough to run an election, and that they were totally partisan. And we have demonstrated how partisan they are. I'm not going to be able to, not just for this election, way before this election. And we have called for SADC, AU, and the UN to be involved. And I know my colleagues, and I won't name them, were the ones actually supporting ZEC when we were actually saying, never, ZEC will not be able to do it, because we could not see the difference between ZEC and ZANU-PF. And I think after the process of Wednesday, we might also not see the difference. Thank you.
Thanks, Elton. Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
You finished what you had to do?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so you came as Elton was winding up. I think you heard his conclusion in his view, looking at the numbers, and we are looking just at the numbers. Tonight, his conclusion that no one won. I think Emerson 48%, Shamisa 46%.
That's right.
According to the figures that he has. And we brought him here not mainly because he's a respondent, but as an accountant. So what look at the numbers. The accountant, you are aware that you've been involved in this analysis of the figures. So I'll give it to you. Sure. What do the numbers say?
Hi everyone. I'm sorry that I was late. I was rushing around a related but separate matter to this, the matter of trying to have something like this, the broadcast live of the court case. As you know, ZBC has been given access, but we're trying to ensure that others will be given access as well. So I apologize that I was a little bit late and coming in and out, just sorting out a couple of things. Just to kind of frame a little bit my contribution this evening. So you understand the parameters that I work within. So I'm a legal practitioner, and that means I have ethical rules which bind me. One of which is something which you may all have heard for the first time this week, is sub judice, which means that you can't say things in public which will risk prejudicing the case. So a case which is ongoing. So I will confine myself today just to really give an overview of what has been presented. These are public documents. The case that has been put before the courts, without necessarily, and I will seek to avoid putting across an opinion of the way that the case should go, to kind of remain within those boundaries. But just to give you a brief kind of overview of the case, to understand the kind of the components of it. So in terms of the evidence which was put before the court, there's sort of three broad categories. The third of which is what seems to be the focus this evening. The first is all around the pre-election environment. Which is very important. These are things like the partisanship of state media, of traditional leaders, etc., etc. So you've heard reference to the bundle of evidence. That's what focuses on the pre-election environment. And then there's the procedural issues around the transmission and collation of results, which is kind of the second main thrust of the applicants of Chamisa's argument. And then the third aspect, which is both the focus of Chamisa's application, as well as, it seems, the focus of this evening's discussion, is the numbers. What do the numbers say? And when we look at the numbers, there's kind of two main sources that we're looking at when we're analyzing the numbers. There's been a huge amount of discussion in the past few weeks about V11s, V23s, and etc., which are very important. V11s and V23s are essential. But a huge amount of the applicant's case in this petition, of Chamisa's case, actually focuses on ZEC's own data. So on the data which ZEC has released, and an analysis of that. Now, Chamisa's key expert is someone called Dr. Utumba, who was involved in Odinga's presidential challenge last year and contributed to the overturning of that election in Odinga versus the IEBC, which is Kenya's version of ZEC. And so this is an analysis of ZEC's own data, trying to consider, do the numbers add up? Now, I kind of came in a little bit at the end, so some of this may have been addressed by Mr. Mangoma already. But I will just kind of run through a little bit some of the things that have emerged from that expert analysis and the analysis of the results which have been released. I think the other thing to say before I address that as well is that many of these things that have been raised in Chamisa's application have now in ZEC's opposing papers, they have admitted that there are certain discrepancies, and they have essentially adjusted those results, which is very interesting and raises some questions from a legal perspective, whether ZEC can actually change the results of an election after the expiry period. I'm sure you're aware that there's a certain amount of time within which ZEC can announce the results, the last day of which was the 4th of August. They announced the results sometime before that, and so there was some time to change it. But there are interesting legal questions around, can ZEC change the results and make these admissions through court papers and change the results through court papers at this stage, some 2 weeks after, some 2 weeks later. But I won't go into. I don't want to go into that too much. Let me just run through some of the figures, and these are all, again, I said these are publicly available. You can get. There's a court case is made up of multiple different documents. There's the founding affidavit, then the respondents, that's ZEC and Mnangagwa, respond using an opposing affidavit. Then there's Chamisa's answering affidavits to those opposing affidavits, and then there's the heads of argument, which I've got with me here, as the heads of argument are mostly focused on the law, but it includes a brief summary of the facts. So these are publicly available documents, and I encourage you to go and have a look at them yourself. In the heads of argument, and this is drawn from the founding papers, there are essentially 7 different discrepancies which are highlighted in terms of, these are discrepancies within ZEC's data which don't quite, where the numbers essentially don't add up, and what the importance of these numbers. It's important to understand that because in terms of the results announced by ZEC, that Mnangagwa only crossed the 50% threshold by a very small margin. On the initial announcement, by about 37,000 votes, but on their kind of later revisions by about 31,830 votes. He crossed that threshold. So when an election comes down to the wire like that, every vote counts, and so that is the context within which these discrepancies, some of which are not huge numbers, but within the context of a very tight race, they can be significant for the case. So, just running through these 7 discrepancies. So the first one is the difference between the results, the announced results and the published results on ZEC's data. So there we see that Mnangagwa had 4,904 votes, less in the announced, less than the announced. Sorry, in ZEC's published results show that Mnangagwa had 4,000 votes less than in the announced results. Thus, essentially, his tally was inflated in those announced results, which alters that percentage. Then, if we look at the second broad discrepancy, this is now the double counting of polling stations. This is where polling stations were essentially counted twice in ZEC's own data, and I should say that ZEC has actually admitted to this and said, this was just a tallying error. So where polling stations were counted twice, it amounted to an additional 7,703 votes for Mnangagwa. Now, ZEC says, yeah, it was an error. It was just a tallying error. But an election is essentially a tallying exercise, and so a tallying error is significant to that degree. Then the third broad discrepancy is where there are polling stations with identical results. Now, this is something which Jamisa's expert witness essentially draws out and says the statistical probability of every single candidate, bear in mind we have 23 candidates, every single candidate getting the identical results at 2 different polling stations is extremely low. And so there were 8 pairs of polling stations, so 16 polling stations in total, where there were these absolutely identical results which emerged. And so when you factor those in, we find that an additional 9,592 votes were given to Mnangagwa as a result of that. Then the fourth discrepancy relates to what are called ghost polling stations. I heard Mr. Ngoma talking a little bit about that. These are polling stations which were not previously published in any place. At these sort of so-called ghost polling stations, a further 5,396 votes in favor of Mnangagwa are added at these. Now, ZEC has said that no, these were not polling stations; these are award centres. But there's no real explanation yet as to whether these votes were correctly allocated to Mnangagwa or not. The fifth broad discrepancy, which has been flagged, is that of polling stations where there were more voters than more people voted at these polling stations than people who were registered at that polling station. Now, this is data which is available, and we also know that there's a cap of 1,000 people who can vote at a polling station. And so when you consider these all of these polling stations where there were more voters than those who were registered, it amounts to 31,200 and an additional a total of 31,204 votes where these are votes which cannot be accounted for. It's essentially impossible for there to be more voters voting at a polling station, and so this raises a big red flag in terms of where did these votes actually come from. The sixth discrepancy, which is a particularly important one, is there's a very large discrepancy between the votes cast at the presidential level and the votes cast at the parliamentary level. Now, Mr. Mangoma referred to one constituency which ZEC has now revised their parliamentary results for. This was Harare North, where I believe there was more than 18,000 more votes cast in the presidential level election than the parliamentary election. Now, ZEC has subsequently sort of increased released new results and increased the parliamentary one to sort of make it match. But the important thing to bear in mind with this is two things, just from a legal perspective. Firstly, is that it's illegal to take a ballot out of a polling station. It actually carries a 3-year sentence. So essentially, it's a question of I think the total number of votes affected by this is 40,717 votes. So we're saying that 40,000. One of the explanations is that 40,000 people committed a crime by walking out of the polling booth, having cast only the presidential ballot and walked out with the parliamentary and local government ballots. That's one explanation. The other important legal aspect of this is that if someone refuses, so you are entitled as a voter to refuse. Most people don't know this, and so people just take the 3 ballots. But you can refuse to take the other ballots, or you can choose to only vote in one. But the law requires for ZEC to record that. There's a mechanism for recording that, and that has not been those records have not been made available. So those 40,000 votes remain unaccounted for, and now again when we're talking of a margin of 31,000 votes, 40,000 votes being unaccounted for is quite significant. So then the last discrepancy which has been flagged is that where the results even within ZEC's database don't exactly tally. So if you add up all of the votes cast, all of the valid votes cast, all of the votes cast for all of the candidates, it doesn't amount to the same as the valid votes cast. And so there's a number of other similar discrepancies in that, where essentially it means that the verifiability of the election is greatly called into question. So those are the 7 discrepancies which emerge primarily out of ZEC's data. Now that's not even getting to the V11s, and that's kind of is really the focus. Now there have been discrepancies which have been outlined from a sample of V11s that have been made available as well. These I'll just touch on very briefly. That the evidence put before the court is that Mnangagwa's votes were inflated by 10,343 votes when contrasted to the sample of the 11s, and that Chamisa's votes were deflated by 19,722 votes. So that gives you just a smattering of some of the numbers which emerge in from the application. I think I don't want to bore you with too many numbers, so I will leave it at that.
Yeah, we'll take questions, but please remember that we're not here to give judgment. We are discussing the numbers. Karen.
Thanks. I think the presenters have given us a very broad-based events, but I'm just surprised. Why did they not call for a recount? Because the source documents are the ballots, which are right in the boxes and the like. I would have imagined if there are discrepancies on the figures, one would have made an application for just recount. If it took 2 days, it would have taken another 2 days just to get proper results. Then, number two, I've also been reading the ZEC response. Why did you file late the figures? They were saying the figures were not filed, they were coming late, to give him possibilities of a technical, that you did not follow court laws and the like, that it could be technical dismissal of a case if we really have the ballots are there and everything, and you file late, why leave it to? Then, of course, the last one is a general one, which possibly maybe politicians might not want, but it's worthwhile asking. Is it worthwhile to fight for presidents when ZANU-PF has 2/3 majority? Because it will be just a sitting duck president who would not. That I'm not seeing, if they're accepting the 2/3 majority parliamentary, unless they were challenging all the results, then it will be a completely fresh election. But to fight for a president who will not have 2/3 majority, I'm finding it mind-boggling, because he will not be an effective president with a hostile parliament.
So you're saying overlook whatever irregularities there are because of that?
No, I'm just...
Another question? Another question? Comment? Yes, Florence?
Yeah, I think the presentations were very good, but I was concerned that you didn't raise anything about the spoiled papers. I did a little count sometime, and there were at least 60,000 spoiled papers. But I felt for a country that boasts such high literacy, I felt that was quite alarming, because the same person fills in the form themselves. They write their ID and they sign, but they don't know how to put an X. I think there's quite a discrepancy there. I don't know if you've looked into that.
Yes, sir. The back.
I would ask, actually, how many of the V11s are available for verification?
I'll take Tony and then I'll get back to the presenters. Tony?
Yes, also some general observations about numbers. I mean, I was struck by the fact that all this stuff gets collected in Excel. So, I mean, Excel's really nice, but when you're entering data, you can make horrendous mistakes very, very quickly and very easily. You know, you put in an extra column and things jump all over the place, and collating them gets difficult. So I can understand that there might be all sorts of errors. But the thing that struck me, and this is really to what Elton's saying, is that having worked with Excel and many, many, many research projects, including large numbers, I mean, you get lots of random errors. Right? You know, when you're entering all the data, people entering data make mistakes. And the mistakes are essentially random. So what I would have expected, if these were all tally errors, is that there would be errors that would go in all sorts of different directions. There would be no systematic stuff. You know? So what I'm understanding is that we have errors, but they're very systematic errors. They're going in two different directions, up in one direction and down in another. And that worries me. And wonders whether there needed to be some thinking about how you have control data entry right at the very top. I mean, you've got the V11s and you've got the V23s, so they're all going to be compiled at the top. And it would be very simple. You know, you've got 23 candidates, you can create these fields very easily in some database like Access, so that you won't have these kinds of errors. So maybe one of the ways forward is you've got to think about better technology for this kind of thing. But I mean, my fundamental point is that clearly what you're saying is that these errors are not random, but they appear to be a systematic pattern.
Thank you. I will not necessarily answer the issue of recount in that sense, because the result the only course is for presidential election is to go to the Constitutional Court. So even those who are talking about recounting, actually, not being a lawyer, I actually don't know where in the Electoral Act you can request the recounting of presidential votes.
Section 67A.
Including the president as well. And I don't know at what point it would, because you must either be at the constituency level or whatever. But for a lot of, in my case, for instance, where we didn't have our agents everywhere else, it's not possible to be able to
recount. You can say you can recount after the announcement.
You can apply after the announcements have been done in terms of Section 67A to say these tallies are incorrect at these polling stations for these reasons we want to recount.
Yeah, but ours, they were always saying it would be announced at provincial level. So really, even getting the numbers, we actually got them way after the announcement. I'm just saying, but the legal people can address that, including the filing that. But the two-thirds majority and the president, I actually think that is the best thing for Zimbabwe that was going to happen. Because what it will do is that it will make the parliament do its job, which is holding the executive to account. And then we will have a proper functioning executive for once. Having two-thirds and the president, we have seen ZANU-PF had it last time and we have gotten nothing out of it. So we know it doesn't bring us anything. So in fact, it is terrible to have two-thirds majority and the president from the same party, because there is zero accountability. So really, as one of the presidential candidates who would have been in that situation, that is exactly the kind of accountability we want, where parliament will become the strong arm. So you actually now have the executive on one hand, you have the legislature on the other, and you have got the judiciary counterbalancing. So having different places there is actually the best thing. So the argument that is being floated, I don't think it works. And you also can't go for impeachment when nothing has been done wrong. Impeachment is got, you have got to be impeached when you have failed to do something. So really, to me, if we actually end up with a different president to a ZANU-PF president, that will be a far better situation for Zimbabwe going forward. The issue of spoiled papers, I saw it. Yes, they are high, but here we're simply trying to balance, to see whether the numbers are balancing across. What you raise indeed shows that there is something that is not right. I will not answer the question of how many V11 are available because I don't know. The tallying errors, you know, when you put them in, because essentially you are putting them in at polling station level, you should, as they put in, they are formula driven all the other way. So you shouldn't be getting those kind of errors. And to try and say, because Excel can make errors, therefore these were errors, I really don't accept it, because I've worked with Excel, where you are diligent enough and you also and that was supposed to balance at that level. To say, do we post this now? Do we not post it because it's agreeing with our data? That is where the check was. If that failed at that point, then it meant that you had incompetent people. And I would have clearly wanted to say ZEC was incompetent. But the arrogance that they had, we can't give them benefit of the doubt. An incompetent person will ask and accept help. These refused every type of help that could be offered. They knew it all, so they don't make mistakes, because they said they would not make mistakes. And they were very clear, if you think we have made a mistake, go to the courts. So really, we cannot give them the benefit of the doubt. And I also think in these numbers, what has not been factored in the numbers I gave has been the identical votes across. I simply told you where some numbers have been manufactured, which we had adjusted. But where polling station A and polling station D have got exactly the identical, because we don't know which one is correct. So we just left them there. But it raises the question, really, the integrity of this data is not there. Also, we have not factored in the postal votes, because the system of the postal votes, even the way it is, the way they vote, and you are voting not at your own house and posting, you are voting at a barrack somewhere and giving it to your superiors. So by the time that vote leaves your hands and it gets to the polling station, anything could have happened. And we have seen so many of these ballots mutating along the way. And we have pleaded to say, let's count postal votes on their own so that we just carry the result. No, they don't want. They want to put it in there because all the postal ballots will be voting for one person. So that's really the way we see it. That these numbers, as he says from a legal point of view, this database is not fit for purpose, but it's for the courts to decide. But certainly, when you can identify what the errors are supposed to be, or the fraud as it is, and we call it fraud because nobody has been persecuted, because it's a very serious error indeed. And it was good that Doug brought about that somebody could refuse to have a ballot. Many people don't refuse. They simply either don't vote, they put it in blank, or they spoil it. So that balancing would be done. I can assure you, my number of ex-presidential is much higher than yours. And in our case, as I said, we actually apprehended somebody who had presidential ballot papers, who was not the presiding officer. So we know that there were ballots that were being introduced. We know for a fact. So we can no longer be told that it's people who refuse or who went away with ballots. That will not be fair to the voting public.
I think the first question was on a recount. So I can't really speak to kind of litigation strategy, but suffice to say that that a recount is not necessarily the silver bullet, because there are ways to fix what's in the ballot box as well. And so where there is there's also very separate processes for going for a recount. It has to be done through a different court, through the electoral court rather than the constitutional court. And so, where there's sufficient evidence, without going for that, that it's a strategic decision which was not mine to make, and so I can't really speak to it. But just to say that there's different ways to approach election petitions, and this is one that Jim has focused on. On the question of filing late, it's an important one, and I think the point which is made in Chamisa's heads of argument is that so to give some background, the Constitutional Court rules require that service for all court processes in the Constitutional Court, for all papers which are initiating court process, have to be served by the sheriff, right? Who's a government officer, of course. Now, the sheriff was given the papers for filing, for service, at 4 p.m. on the day of on the last day. And in terms of even normal court processes, would have up until 10 p.m. to serve, but in an urgent constitutional matter like this, you could easily go up to 12 p.m. The fact that the sheriff decided to serve the following day, I don't think is something really that you can visit upon the applicant to say that well, because a third party didn't serve, you are out of time. I think the other thing which a lot of people don't realize, people don't realize that that to bring an electoral petition in 7 days, in the 7-day time limit, is crazy. The amount of collection of evidence and drafting of court papers and the amount that goes into an electoral petition, to bring that within 7 days is an extremely short time period. So it's not like the lawyers were sort of sitting and kind of like just having a drink and then decided, oh, it's 4 o'clock, we should get down to the court. There's a huge amount that goes into it. On the question of the 2/3 majority, I think on a principled level, I think if you believe that an election has not been done in accordance with the will of the people, I think that there's a really important principled reason. But to really get to kind of the heart of your question is, would a Chamisa presidency, a hypothetical Chamisa presidency, be an effective one in light of ZANU-PF's control of parliament? I think there's two things to say. Number one, I don't think we can prejudge the parliamentary petitions which have been made, a number of losing presidential candidates, both from MDC and ZANU-PF, in fact. Parliamentary, did I say presidential? Parliamentary candidates have filed petitions. There's a slightly longer time period for the deciding of those cases. So we don't know how that will change. But the other thing to say is that there's been a lot of talk about the fact that ZANU-PF crossed the mark in the National Assembly in terms of 2/3 majority. But ZANU-PF didn't get anywhere near to 2/3 in the Senate. And there's various reasons we can get into that. Basically, the Senate is based on proportional representation of votes cast at the National Assembly level. So where a party got 49% of the vote and another got 51% for a National Assembly constituency, those 49 votes are essentially wasted votes when it comes to the National Assembly. But for the Senate, all of those votes count. So it means that ZANU-PF are quite low, quite far below the market, even if every single one of the 18 chief appointments vote together with ZANU-PF, they're still lower than the 2/3. Now, of course, that ZANU-PF would still have an absolute majority, more than 50% in parliament. So it would make it difficult for an MDC executive to pass laws, etc. But in terms of this, what has been discussed around, the 2/3 mark and the changing of the constitution and impeachment and that sort of thing, ZANU-PF actually don't have the 2/3 majority. So I don't know if that helps answer the question. Again, yeah, I think on the issue of the V11s, I was not involved in that aspect of the case, so I can't give you a figure of exactly how many there were. But one thing that I will say, which I think is important, is an important issue for people to realize around the V11s. An aspect that I did help a bit with was the documenting the stories and collecting affidavits of polling agents who were beaten up at polling stations, were assaulted while trying to bring V11s to the command center, who were intimidated and chased away from polling stations. So the question of collection of a comprehensive batch of V11s is one with many nuances in a Zimbabwean context, and so I think that it's an important aspect to be aware of. Just exactly the challenges that polling agents faced in terms of collecting those V11s. But but what I can say is that there is a large sample which has been filed with court, and a number of discrepancies have been highlighted out of that sample. Had there been more time to file, perhaps that sample may have been larger. But that's about as much as I can say.
Okay. Yeah, last three. Yes.
Yeah. My question is directed mainly to Mr. Mangoma. Are we not facing the Kenyan stairway, where with the evidence available, the court can order for a rerun, and is the opposition, especially the main opposition, going to participate in an election with the same officials that say we had made all these other mistakes? I can say mistakes in courts, because most probably they are not genuine mistakes, but So are we going to have a re-election if the courts say so with the same officials? And if they are the same officials, is the opposition going to participate in that election?
Thank you very much. I'll try to repeat my questions on the aspect of numbers, which seems to be the topic of issue today. The losing presidential candidate, Mr. Mangoma, suggests that in his calculations based on his experience, of course, in accountants and not essentially on elections, he talks about President Mnangagwa having secured perhaps 48% and Mr. Chamisa 46% or somewhere thereabout. I'm not sure whether you forgot to also allocate calculate your own percentage as a presidential candidate alongside others, in order for us to then be able to say 46 plus 48 plus how much for the other 20 presidential candidates, so that we'll be able to probe the genuinity of your accountants or auditing, as the case may be. Then my other question goes to the same issue with regards to percentages. I don't know whether gentlemen would want to own up and realize that whenever they utter things as public officials, history is quick to record and quickly gets made along the way. Before the elections were announced, I'm sure one of the alliance principals talked about something within the margin of 64% for Mr. Chamisa, and then within some 48 hours or 72 hours, if my memory serves me well, the same number deteriorated to 54% for Mr. Chamisa again, and later on, they were talking about the possibilities of a no winner, to which you seem to be agreeing today, suggesting that there could be potentially the need for what is called a second election and not essentially a runoff. So my question is, are you guys really genuine with numbers, the numbers that you seem to love so much, so that when you speak about them, we'll then be able to suggest you are speaking them credibly. Insofar as you have not been able to be genuine, even unto yourselves with the numbers that you love so much. I will come to the question of the changing of results, as it were. Primarily with regard to what you are saying is the lack of tallying between the presidential election on the other side and the parliamentary and local. If that is a fact, as it turns out to be, now, are you quite so convinced and vivid that that discrepancy affects the announced winner of the elections alone, or it also affects the 22 others, including the losing one that we are proud to have today? Why am I saying so? Is because if it happens that the presidential vote became more than the parliamentary and the local government elections, do we have sufficient evidence for us then to say that was a technicality meant to benefit the winner alone, and then perhaps say other presidential candidates did not also have their figures inflated? Why am I saying so? Because it seems from your presentation, both the two of you, one thing that I can categorically agree with you is that perhaps the mathematics of Zimbabwe Election Commission officials may not be quite very good. But I also begin to doubt yours. Why am I saying that? Because if we agree that their mathematics may not have gotten them well, perhaps for various reasons, we may have people who are not mathematically sound there. I have never checked their credentials and I wouldn't want to speculate. Or perhaps it was because of certain pressures that we also know during the build-up to the election, there were a lot of pressure coming from all circles, particularly from the opposite circles. Now, if you say at certain polling stations, okay, we had inflated figures or number of voters surpassing the number of registered voters at that particular polling station. Now, if we agree that Zeki was prone to making errors, wouldn't you also think that perhaps Zeki had also made an error with regards to the number of registered voters at that particular polling station without rushing to make a biased conclusion, because we are working with probabilities? Now, why is that in your probabilities you are only focused on one side that seems to benefit perhaps the opposition or cast serious suspicions on the result announced so far, but without giving also the other side in order for us to then be able to work with, to have a credible debate about numbers without prejudicing.
Thanks. That you first and longer.
Sure. I think I think one of the questions was directed to Mr. Mangoma. So I'll just address the question of, do the discrepancies go in one way only? I'm glad that we agree, on some things, but yeah. So all of that has been factored in terms of the analysis which has been done. So in certain places, there was simply just inflation of numbers for one candidate and deflation for the other. There are, of course, certain places where both or all candidates may have gained, right? So, for example, a good example of that is with the double counting of polling stations, right? Where a polling station is double counted, it means that of course all candidates will get double the number of votes that they got at that polling station, right? But what we find when you look at where the double counting took place, they were almost all in areas where President Mnangagwa did well, right? So what that essentially means is that if at a particular polling station, which was double counted, Mnangagwa got 500 votes and Chamisa got 30 votes, and another candidate, and the other candidates maybe got, let's say, another candidate got 1 vote, right? Then it means that while yes, the other candidate comes out with 2 votes and they get an extra vote they didn't have. Chamisa gets 60 votes. He now has an extra 30 votes that he didn't have. And Mnangagwa gets an additional 500 votes. So he now has 1,000 votes, right? So to that degree, everyone benefits, right? But because it's concentrated in an area at a polling station where one particular candidate has done well, what it means in effect, and remember that with our elections the percentage is important, is that it widens the margin. So to say that everyone benefits is actually a misnomer, because in fact it only benefits. It widens the margin for whoever did well at that particular polling station. So I don't know if that helps to address that question. I think the other one will mostly directed at Mr. Mango. Thanks.
Thank you very much. There was an interesting question. What I can tell you about if there is going to be a rerun in the event that a rerun is asked for, whether as presidential candidates we will participate under the same, using the same ZEC or not. The first thing, speaking for myself, is if there is a rerun, I'm not rerunning. I've done my bit, and to ask, to put it together with the gentleman who asked whether we've just been focusing on 2 candidates. No, in fact, I've got percentages for everyone. My adjusted total would leave me with 0.14%. So I've got them for everyone. So all we are saying is that the numbers have been worked out for everyone, but there are 2 of interest. But if you want, we have got them all. I certainly would think that if a rerun was to be asked for, I think that the Constitutional Court there's some glaring errors or issues that have been raised, that they ask that those be corrected. And so there is no point of just rerunning. I'm told that would rather answer that, because you can't just be able to say, go ahead and do it exactly like you did it before. So I think that that's going to be one of the. I will not be able to speak to what anybody else was saying. What we have done is to work with the numbers that I don't know at what point Wangwadi got in, but I actually said when our starting point was the discs that we got. And what is actually interesting is the disc number that I got from my disc and the one that is being talked about by Mr. Coulter are actually different. So we actually have got differences all the way. So what we're saying is that when you get all these numbers that don't make sense, really you can't be fast about them, because they are all not making sense. Every time you touch something, it differs. You really don't know what numbers to believe anymore. So for instance, you come to an area where we are given a voters roll, which says at this polling station there are 300 voters. Really, this thing here we've been demanding and asking to get a voters roll. The voters roll that was used on the voting day, I saw it at the polling station. Never saw it before. But I had a voters roll that says there should be 300 people there. I have no reason to say I shouldn't have 300, there shouldn't be 300 people there. So if 500 people vote, the question must be, where did the other 200 come from? And why were they allowed? And if indeed that polling station, there were now 500 instead of 300, why were we not given the revised voters roll? So because we can't answer those questions. And I said very clearly in my own case, we've always been on the case of ZEC. It's there, journalists know, you can track where court was saying these people are not fit for purpose. But they were saying we are the best since sliced bread. So I will not I could not give them any, I never gave ZEC any benefit of the doubt because I knew they were there to steal. Now as an accountant, I then said, given this fudging of numbers, which is very systematic, take someone who doesn't understand arithmetic or math, and you make them a cashier in a business. One day you will find an over, the other one you will find a short. But if you find a short every day, do you think that's an error or this person is just stealing? So this is how these things, how you measure them. So I think that we just don't know. And I said it very early on that when someone is winning with 35,000 votes, what I would have done if I was a commissioner in ZEC would have been to say these numbers are too close. Let's go to the Constitutional Court and we say we are not going to announce the votes, the result on the 5th day. We want to bring in experts to do the checking on our behalf. Then there would have been no problem. Or alternatively, if every polling station that was being declared was being put up and say at Magunje polling station A, we have gotten 200 votes, these are the results, and they were being posted and we were doing our own additions, nobody would worry about it. But if you are told, no, even if you know how to add, please just don't touch the calculator. We will give you the numbers. And then you give us a dog's breakfast. Why do you want us to smile at you? We must hit at you. This ZEC has done a terrible job for this country. And they've done a terrible job for President Mnangagwa. And therefore, we do not need institutions like that. We need institutions that will get our Zimbabwe to be a better country. So to actually, someone who is that arrogant and does such a bad job, they should all actually be fired because they've refused to resign. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And I think just a quick one on, what, I think it's not surprising that that from Mr. Mangoma's analysis that he has some different numbers because, given the very short time frames of filing these petitions, what has come out in the various court papers that have been filed are likely the tip of the iceberg in terms of things, and a lot of this might play out even in weeks to come, even though the court case will be over. A lot of this may still emerge. So I think that's something that is to be expected, and which is why I think our focus on numbers sometimes is a little bit misplaced. In fact, the constitutional test was it a free and fair election? And if there's a great quote from the Kenyan Constitutional Court in the Odinga matter. I'll just read it to you. It's very short because it really speaks to this issue. The court has gone on about the fact that the requirement is that an election should be conducted in a lawful and unconstitutional and constitutional manner. And the judge goes on to say, elections are not only about numbers, as many, surprisingly, even prominent lawyers would like the country to believe. Even in numbers, we used to be told in school that to arrive at a mathematical solution, there is always a computational path one has to take as proof that the process indeed gives rise to the stated solution. Elections are not events, but processes, right? So I think it's important that we don't get too caught up in the numbers. I think the numbers do speak for themselves, but I think it's important that we don't get too caught up in the process, and we ask was this election conducted in a lawful, constitutional and verifiable manner? Then just on the question of if this goes to a rerun, and Chamisa of course has pleaded that has sought relief that he be declared winner. However, if it does go to a rerun, then the court has very wide powers in these constitutional matters to give appropriate relief. And so I think without prejudging the court, something which Dr. Noah Manika put in his court papers is something called a structural interdict, which basically means that he's sought from the court that the court would not only overturn the election, but set out the parameters for precisely how the next election should be conducted. Now that's something which is within the power of the court, and so that is something which is possible. That where these issues have arisen, and where there are concerns about the manner in which the previous election was conducted, those can be addressed through the court process as well.
Thanks, Doug. Well, we come to the end of this evening's extraordinary policy dialogue on an extraordinary situation. Not making any conclusions except that one which has emerged very strongly about ZEC. And I raised at the beginning is a test case in terms of the management of elections, and clearly from the figures, the numbers, to use Elton's term, dog's breakfast, with sliced bread. The ZEC is already condemned. And indeed, many of us had doubts about the capacity of the ZEC. The element of apparent fraud is quite alarming. So we all wait anxiously for Wednesday. But here's to thank Elton and Doug. Thanks very much. Short notice, and you that have turned up very short notice. Thank you very much. And thank you for the live streamers. And the debate is being watched all over the world tonight. And so that this is an internationalized situation that we have in Zimbabwe. And I hope that we don't suffer equal embarrassment on Wednesday. Because the dog's breakfast issue is really what it is. Thank you. That's the refreshments, sandwiches, and tea and coffee outside. And strong stuff across the road.